Welcome into the Blue Raider Podcast. I'm your host, Jake Bolden, and today is Tuesday, December 26th, and I hope all the Blue Raider fans and faithful had a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year's. My guest on today's show is a contributor and analyst at GoMiddle.com, where he specializes mostly in the recruiting side, which is why I'm very excited to have him on. His name is Austin Lewis. Austin, how's it going?
Man, it's going good. Just like you, we're all getting ready. When we're recording this, we're all getting ready for the holidays and excited to spend some time with some family and friend before recruiting coverage kicks back off here in about a week or two as you start approaching that February signing day.
Any plans for the New Year's?
Not really. I normally am asleep by 9. I'm an early bird, gets to work. If I'm doing anything late at night, it's my iPad or iPhone watching film or checking Twitter, or in the case a couple weeks ago, I was tracking planes in my bed, trying to see where Middle Tennessee was going and trying to connect the dots. I guess I can say that now that I was tracking planes and not sound like a creeper. But no, I'm a pretty much an early bird in all sense of the word.
When you were talking about watching planes and stuff, that was kind of something that I wish I had that skill to do whenever we were looking for our coach before the Derek Mason hire was. Like I said, I was kind of in the dark, and really I was shocked when the news came out. Was that something that you had any intel on?
No, Derek Mason was we did hot list, and we had hot list ready to go years ago because we heard some buzz a couple of years ago that Stockstill was close to retiring, and how true that was, we weren't sure, but we heard enough buzz that we're like, okay, let's go ahead and get some stuff ready to go. And then when the news started to break about the announcement that there was going to be an announcement on that Monday morning, we heard from 2 or 3 people, second and third hand, that they were going to do something on that Monday after Thanksgiving. And we're like, could this be? And so we were frantically Monday and Tuesday trying to put together a hot list and then updating and connecting the dots, tracking planes, trying to put together some stuff using any connection we had. And that's the great thing about the Rivals Network. We have partners at other schools that they're hearing things, and we were talking with them, doing whatever we could to provide the latest. But then the Derek Mason name drops, was it Tuesday afternoon? Mm-hmm. And that kind of shocked us all because he never made our hot list. We did not hear his name pop up at all until someone dropped it. I think it was 3HL in Nashville dropped it. And I was kind of shocked. Mm-hmm. But they kind of kept it under the radar. I guess when the guys in Franklin, Nashville area, you really don't have to fly to Franklin to interview him or have him come to you. He's right down the road. And they talked about that in the press conference. They don't have to get a GPS for him to find Oakland High School. He knows where Oakland is. He knows where Riverdale is. He knows where Independence is. And all the area high schools. He knows them well. And so that's one of the reasons I think he's the head coach.
Right. Well, as far as him being thrown on us as fans, I think one of the big things thrown on him, especially in today's world, is as hectic and crazy as signing day can be here in December. Only had a handful of weeks to actually put together a signing class. And in today's world, when the coach leaves or a coach gets dismissed, so does every recruit that's on that roster. So we've already discussed in the past about where the transfer portal has put Middle right now, but it being a week fresh off of the signing period, I'm just interested where we can sit here and discuss what kind of talent did we gather, where does this put MTSU now in the future. So first, let's go ahead and address the numbers as far as on signing day. We have 23 total signees, 15 of them are freshmen, 8 of them are from the transfer portal. According to Rivals, we're in third in Conference USA behind Western and Liberty. I think that's respectable, given in the past where we tend to sign a lot of no-names. But Mason's words at his press conference, he's extremely excited about this class. He feels strongly about what his coaches were able to do in a short amount of time. And overall, he's looking at those dominant traits for guys is speed, height, length, physicality. And I think for the most part, he checked a lot of those boxes off. And you kind of alluded to it there when you're talking about Mason. He found plenty of local talent, plenty of state champions. So I'm pretty excited about the signings.
Yeah, I am too. There's a lot to like about this class. And when he described the players and the kind of players he's looking for in that press conference, about them having those dominant traits, I think was the word he used. When you watch the film, those dominant traits are evident. These guys are strong. They're physical. A couple of them are a little undersized. There's a defensive end that's like 6'4", 225. But the thing about 6'4", 225 is that he has the frame to grow into 250, 260, which is where you want your defensive ends to be at. And so when they do lack a little bit of size, they have the frame most of the time to gain the weight to get up to that Division I level, size and speed and power. But when you watch the film for a lot of these guys, there's a lot to like. Speed, power, length, physicality, some learning. They're going to have to do some developing. They're going to have to do. But even Derek Mason mentioned that in the press conference, how we're a developmental program, that we're not going to, here at Middle Tennessee, they're not going to bring in the 5-star talents. They're going to bring in the 2- and 3-star talents, and they're going to develop them. And that's what you see in the signing class. Guys that are going to get developed, going to get coached up. And when you look at the coaching staff that Derek Mason is assembling, it's a coaching staff that I think so far shows the signs that they're going to be able to develop the players.
As far as these freshmen go, are there any names to you that stand out?
For the freshmen, I think most of the freshmen are redshirt type guys. Mm-hmm. And so if you're expecting a freshman to come in and in 2024 make an impact, more often than not, that's not going to be the case. Mm-hmm. Most of the impact you're going to see in 2024 is probably going to come from the transfer portal and the JUCO guys, because those guys have spent a year or two out of high school. They've spent a year or two in a college-level strength program, or should have. Mm. And the idea of putting a 18-year-old boy that's a true freshman up against a 22 or 23 or 24-year-old redshirt senior, that's a boy versus a man matchup, and he's going to lose every time. And so most of the real impact you're going to see in 2024 is going to come from the JUCOs and the transfers. The freshmen that I'm most optimistic about long term, if you can look into 2025 and 2026, is that receiver out of Orlando. He's
Josh
like
Evans.
6'3", 210, 215. And that kind of size, you can't teach size. You can't teach weight. That's going to make it really fun. That defensive end that I mentioned earlier, Tyon Robinson, he's 6'4", 225. You get him in a redshirt year, get him in a strength program, and he's let him blossom, get up to 250. He's a guy who's going to anchor one of those defensive end spots. But that receiver, I think, is a guy maybe next year, as soon as next year, at 6'3", 210 already, he's ready. He's got the size. He's got the speed. He's ready to go. If anybody plays this year outside of an emergency junk, someone got hurt, it's going to be that guy.
And I couldn't agree more. There was nothing as far as physical traits that necessarily in any of the freshman class that stood out to me. I think Benke, the tight end, there seems to be a lot of excitement around him. I don't know, again, where we're used to an air raid offense where a lot of those guys, we use a tight end often, but as far as Derek Mason, the defensive-minded coach that he is, and we're still, at the moment, we're with Mitch Stewart, so it would appear that we're going to have the same offensive scheme that we are carrying over from the Stockstill era. But, who's to say that what Mitch Stewart ran when he was at Murray State, because I know it wasn't an air raid offense, but he pretty much ran more of a multiple type set, so it could be anything. So as far as what he's going to utilize with his talent, who's to say that we throw in more tight end sets, we throw in, like you're talking about Josh Evans and maybe some sort of nickel packages type things, who knows, But I think there's certainly a lot of talent. But I think most of his skill position guys are coming from the transfer portal, as you're saying. And as far as those guys go, you talk about guys that just have the experience. Not only that, but also, as you say, the years of strength and conditioning programs, because that does a world. If anyone listening can remember when they were 18 versus to what they were like when they were 22 years old, a lot just happens. And I didn't play Division I football, so I can only imagine what it does to guys that spend 6 months in a weight room in between seasons. But I mean, getting SEC level guys, because you don't get recruited to the SEC on a sheer accident. So when I see guys like Omari Kelly, Gamarian Carter from Vanderbilt, those two wide receivers right there, I mean, I have to imagine we're going to recoup some of that lost wide receiver talent to the transfer portal.
Yeah, I agree. I watched some film on Omari Kelly night before last, when his name came across, and he was smooth in his route running, very fluid athlete, probably the most athletic guy I watched, which makes sense. He was a 4-star athlete coming out of high school. And so I'm really impressed by what he offers and really expect him to kind of plug in barring injury and anything like that. I think he'll plug in at one of the starting receiver spots the day he steps on campus. But that Brandon Harris, the Wake Forest transfer who came to Middle Tennessee through Wake Forest and Vandy, that's a guy who played at an ACC school, had 2 scores. One was a scoop and score, one was a pick six. And he's a guy who I think is start day one. This is not a scrub third stringer who's frustrated because he's not playing, hitting the transfer portal. This is a guy who played. That's a guy who's going to make an impact at Middle Tennessee, I think, in 2024.
Yeah, and we have already limited secondary health with Jacoby Thomas moving on in the transfer portal. We have Flu Ellen, who's entered for the draft. So dwindling depth there as is, and so having a guy who's had ACC gameplay is going to be tremendous for that defensive backfield. But moving on to the offensive line, this is an area where we clearly are looking for a certain type of guy. Now, I have not been able to watch film on these guys, but to be fair, coming from a fan that's watched plenty of Conference USA football, I think having guys like Ellis Adam at 6'4", 365, yeah, that's right, 365 pounds at 6'4", and then Shamar Crawford, the independent CC transfer at 6'5", 305 pounds. So, I mean, already we're seeing guys that I couldn't tell you have stepped foot in Murfreesboro in a very long time. Those are some big boys that we've bolstered the line.
Yeah, Ellis Adams, he was moving guys. Now he's playing at the FCS level, but he's moving guys, like moving grown men at will. And that's really what jumped out to me. And so I expect him to plug in at one of the guard spots in 2024. Shamar Crawford's a little more flexible in where he could play, but I would expect him to play probably offensive tackle. He's got some athleticism, not as big. I don't think he's as strong, but a little more athletic, which for me, I like to plug those type of guys in on the offensive tackle sides, the outside of the offensive line, to kind of anchor the backside protection of the quarterback. Ellis Adams, though, the big drawback with him is his footwork is not good. His footwork could use a little bit of work. I mean, he's a big guy, 6'4", 365. So there's a little plodding with it, not as fluid of an athlete as Crawford is. But if you put Crawford at, let's say, left tackle, and you put Adams at a left guard, you have a solid backside protection for Nick or Richardson at quarterback.
Yeah, I'm glad you went ahead and created that segue there for me, because I'm interested to know if you think there will be any sort of quarterback battle going in this spring, because Richardson, the Cincinnati transfer, well, it's kind of a winding road as far as where he's from necessarily. He signed out of high school from David Lipscomb Academy in Nashville to Cincinnati before, I guess, accepting the scholarship all the way out west to Golden West in California Community College. He plays limited time. That's where I get a little conflicted as far as my view on him. Stats doesn't necessarily mean anything, as we talked about Kelly and Carter, those guys that are coming from SEC schools that played very limited minutes. But Luther Richardson definitely has the size you're looking for in a quarterback at 6'3", 225, slightly larger than Vadiato, but he has the traits, and I could see legitimately he could push Vadiato for playing time.
I think you'll see some competition in the spring, and a lot of it depends on what goes on at offensive coordinator. Mason wants to run a pro-style offense, but even that term is flexible. Are you going to run a straight West Coast offense where you're in two tights and a fullback and a running back a lot? There's a lot of flexibility in pro-style offense. I mean, you could run what Jeff Brom's running at Louisville, and that's a pro-style offense. There's a lot of flexibility in that. And depending on where they go at offensive coordinator, is it Mitch Stewart who stays, or are they looking another direction? Will depend on maybe which quarterback gets a leg up because of their traits. I think Nick Vadiato is unusually suited for a traditional air raid passing attack. He's really smart, really accurate, really good on those rhythm throws. And it may be the protection for the offensive line last year, but I didn't see enough from Vadiato pushing the ball vertically for me to feel comfortable that he could push the ball vertically in a pro-style offense last year. But when I watched Luther Richardson, this is a guy, when I watched his high school film, who was throwing outside the numbers on a line opposite hash. So he's throwing across the field on a line We're talking 40 yards, 50 yards across the field. And those are the things you have to be able to throw in a pro-style offense. You got to be able to throw the 14-yard to 12-yard semi-route. You've got to throw the deep out route. And those are the things he can throw that I'm not sure that Vadiato can. I think Vadiato may get him in the shorter to intermediate passing game. But Luther, I think, wins out on the deep and the outside the hash passes. And so it'll be interesting with who the offensive coordinator is and what they want to do schematically and on who gets a leg up in that competition based on their individual traits.
Vadiato already, in my opinion, would have that leg up, Division I experience that he has over Richardson. And again, I think this is a bunch of if, ands, or but, because like you say, if we stick to what we know at middle, and that's an air raid offense, you kind of want a guy like Vadiato who, like you, as you say, rhythm throws. He's also a lot more mobile, from what I can tell, compared to Luther. But that doesn't necessarily mean anything, because as you've stated, the offensive line last year battled some injuries. They're kind of dwindling, and unfortunately for Vadiato, that required a lot of scrambling, and sometimes that required him to make some rush throws, got him into bad situations. I keep thinking back to Colorado State, where he's forced to make some late game decisions were coming back, and they're just not there. And if it's not a design pass play, I don't know that Vadiato is that guy. But again, when you put Luther Richardson in against Division I talent, is he the same guy? Is he also one that is a lot more decisive in the pocket, or is he a guy that does he need a rhythm throw? Does he need that kind of offense? I don't know. There's so many question marks, and it's one of those things you can't see until they put the pads on and we see him play. So to me personally, I think Vadiato is the day one starter, but with a new coach, new staff, if Mitch Stewart stays, I would say he definitely has the leg up. But if we see Stewart gone, the playing field's level. It could literally be anybody there.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think Nick, day one of spring practice, Nick is going to take the QB1 reps. It's what happens week 2 and week 3 of spring practice. Does Luther press and push Nick for those first team reps? And that's what's going to be so intriguing about spring practice this year, is the install of the new offense, install of the new defense in the quarterback position. Because at this level, at Conference USA, guys like Carter and guys like Omari Kelly are going to plug in, and they're going to play at receiver, and they're going to perform at receiver, and they're going to do a good job at receiver at this level. But what happens at quarterback? Because if your quarterback and your offensive line is out of sync and not good, especially in a pro-style offense, there's not a lot of ways you can hide that. You can hide a bad offensive line with a lot of screens and a lot of bubble passes, which is what they did over the last year or two. But in a pro-style offense, that's a lot harder to hide a bad offensive line without max protecting, chipping a tight end or chipping a back out of the backfield.
And you also need a smart guy back there. You can't just throw anybody. I know you're saying you kind of need the right players in place as far as all 11 go to run a pro-style offense, but you also need a guy between the ears that understands what's going on, requires a lot of film study to be good, and to be, I don't want to say Sunday ready, but he needs to, a pro-style offense, they don't call it that for no reason. So further push my dual quarterback narrative there. We start the year off with Tennessee Tech, so I wouldn't think it's outlandish that we would come out with 2 quarterbacks. Same with we go to Mississippi. Mississippi is a team that doesn't necessarily always have the greatest defense, but it is an SEC school, and I have seen this in the past where an air raid has worked well against SEC schools because of its natural rhythm. We're able to spread the field horizontally as opposed to vertically. Outrun those big defensive lines, and then we get that match with Manny Diaz and Duke, which I'm pretty excited about to see, because I would have to assume by week 3 and then week 4 we're at Memphis, we kind of have an idea of what we're dealing with as far as the offense and quarterback goes. But that's just kind of the schedule, how life goes as far as discovering that. But I do think, I know I'm harping on it, but I think it's exciting to see a quarterback battle.
It is, and that's going to be the fun thing about, again, spring practice and fall camp is, how do these two guys compete for the battle, push one another, but not divide a team and not divide a coaching staff over who's going to give them the best chance to win year one? This is going to be a challenging year because you're installing new team, new system with new personnel. It usually takes a year or 2 to get your culture and your system and your core beliefs installed on a team. And so Mason's going to be working with the foundation that Stock still built as he works to build up his team. And so that quarterback battle is going to play a big role in how well Middle Tennessee does this year. If Vadiato can play and run that pro-style offense to a high level, then maybe Middle Tennessee finishes the year 7 wins, maybe with a couple balls bouncing their direction, 8 wins. But if he struggles and Luther's not ready to run that offense, then you're looking at another 4 or 5 win season. That quarterback position is going to play a big role, and you're going to see both of them probably against Tennessee Tech. You're probably going to see both of them against Ole Miss for completely different reasons, in my opinion. I think in Tennessee Tech, you hope, as Middle Tennessee, you're starting the year off against Tech with a 44-13 win. But on the flip side, the next week when you play Ole Miss, you're probably looking at something like 44-13 loss. And so in both situations, you're sitting here playing both quarterbacks for entirely different reasons.
Mm-hmm. It certainly is interesting, and I think we'll get a lot more clarity on the subject when spring practice rolls around and we see who's running with the ones, who's running with the twos. But of course, what would a sports podcast show be about if we didn't have any sort of speculation on our end? So I want to revert back to that signing class. I think something that a lot of Middle Tennessee fans, if you're a fan, you're more than likely from the mid-state, Murfreesboro area. I think one thing that stood out to me, just being a fan, I've covered high school sports for a long time. It's really promising to see Mason recruit the mid-state very well. As far as my count, I have 6 guys from the mid-state. That does exclude the guys he found, Chattanooga. I know we have a Chattanooga transfer, and then we also have Memphis, 2 guys from Memphis. But when I look at this list of guys, Richardson being on that list from Lipscomb Academy, but you have Jason Overton from Pearl-Cohn, Zion Simpson-Smith from Pearl-Cohn, Grant Chadwick from Tullahoma, kicker, whose brother is also on the roster here at MT, Jackson Lowe from Brentwood, Ashton Jones from Oakland. I just want to say those names, not only just because they're staying home. I think it's important that those guys get the recognition they deserve. But one thing I want to pick apart here with Mason is he found state champions. In that list there, 5 of the 6 won a state championship. I think it's so important, and you're a big Lady Raider fan as myself, and Rick Insel says this quite often, that it's important that you find winners. You get guys that understand the culture of winning football games. What does it take to win football games? Because it's very common you're going to sign 20, 25 guys. They come from programs that are middle of the road in Florida, Texas, Georgia. But at the end of the day, it does take a certain mentality to be a winner and to understand that being a winner it's a 12-month job. It's not a 3-month August to November job. It requires a lot of diligence. It requires a certain level of focus in all aspects. And so I think there's something to be said about Mason not only recruiting the mid-state, but he's made it a point that he wants to find champions. He wants to find winners.
And I think that's something that Middle Tennessee fans have desperately wanted. Not only recruit the local kids, the kids in their backyard at Oakland and Riverdale and Blackman and Siegel, but also the Nashville area in general. And he, for 2 weeks on the job, recruiting and signing 6 guys out of high school, or 5 guys out of high school plus Luther, who's a JUCO transfer with Nashville ties, says a lot about how he's going to do, what he's going to do, and what he's going to emphasize. And he's made it a point. In his opening press conference, I think it was, from Nashville to the borough. And he's going to lock down and do the best he can to lock down the state of Tennessee and that make local kids go to Middle Tennessee. Give them the opportunity. Now, if they choose that they believe it's in their best interest to go to Michigan State or to go to UConn, as some of the local players did, then okay, great, more power to them. But it's not like he's not going to put a good faith effort to make sure those players know that they're wanted and they're welcome at Middle Tennessee. And that's what fans want. And the side benefit, just from a ticket sales perspective, is that when you sign these guys from the area, guess who buys tickets?
Right.
Their mamas, their daddies, their grandmas, their aunts, and their uncles, and their brothers, and their sisters. And those guys are going to come out to watch Middle Tennessee football. And they're going to want to, hopefully, ideally, some wins, want to go to Middle Tennessee as students. They're going to want to continue to buy tickets at Middle Tennessee after their brother graduates. And so that's going to create this culture where Middle Tennessee State University, the Blue Raiders, are Middle Tennessee's team, not a group of people from Georgia and Florida and Alabama and Mississippi and maybe a couple of Tennesseans sprinkled in there.
Right.
They're Tennesseans. They're Middle Tennesseans playing for Middle Tennessee's team. And I think that will play off long term. It's going to take some time to create that culture, but I think it's going to pay off long term.
Yeah, well put, Austin. I couldn't agree with you more. I think there's more than just finding a good football player in there. There's many more to the program, the university, that are big bonuses to finding guys like that. So before we sign off here with you, I have to know predictions on this first season, and I want you to know I know that it's, as we're recording this, it's late December. I'm holding this to you in August. So if you say something outlandish and it's way off, your profession's on the line here.
Yeah, well, in journalism, we're kind of known for taking hot takes, but I kind of take some freezing cold takes more often than not. I'm going to caution Blue Raider fans, and the people in the athletic office and Murphy Center may hate me for saying this, but I want to caution fans and pump the brakes a little bit. It's fun to see people excited about Middle Tennessee football for the first time in a couple of years. But in my opinion, where the roster stands now, there's 10 more scholarships to play with. There's 10 more opportunities to bring in impact players. And I think they will. But where the roster stands now, Christmas weekend, I think you're looking at more of a 4-5 win season. But I think for me, the exciting part is next year, 2025, 2026, when the schedule gets a little lighter and is not as daunting. I mean, 2 Power 5 teams this year. Anytime you play a Power 5 team, that's a challenge, especially for a first-year coach. And so this year, if you get to 5 wins, great. If you get to 6 wins, awesome. If Mason gets to 7 wins, I think Middle Tennessee fans need to be doing cartwheels. Mm-hmm. And again, it's December. We don't know who the offensive coordinator is going to be. We don't know the other position coaches. That changes things. If you ask me in 3 weeks and we know who the offensive coordinator is, I may say, hey, we got 6 wins, we got 7 wins. But right now, as things stand now, I'm saying 5 wins, 5 and 7.
Yeah, I think that's a good place to put it realistically, especially given that non-conference schedule, because you got Tennessee Tech, who I think, new coach or not, that should be a win. But you've got, like as you say, 2 Power 5s in Ole Miss, Duke, and then Memphis is as close to a Power 5 and the G5 as you're going to get. They field good teams year in, year out. So it's tough to say, too, with what Conference USA is going to do. I still think we are a few steps behind WKU, Liberty, and I think New Mexico State is actually a team that's really proved themselves this last year as well. But all that's conference talk to say I think 5 wins is realistic, and I don't want fan base to become pessimistic over that. That's not a bad thing at all. I mean, 5 wins is respectable for a guy that had to recoup, first of all, a signing class in 3 weeks. He's having to put a lot of puzzle pieces together in a very short amount of time. And again, we talk about this in basketball. Recouping a roster year in and year out is a challenge in itself because you're having to pitch your guys every year. All that to say, 5 wins, I respect it. If they win 8 in a conference championship, man, is that egg on your face, Austin? I don't know what to tell you. So
yeah. If Middle Tennessee goes 8, wins, let's say 9 or 10 games and wins the conference championship, Derek Mason's conference coach of the year, and Massaro and McPhee and Lee and all the folks in Murphy Center are welcome to call me out. And I think Mason will be getting a significant contract extension in that situation.
He's probably leaving. That's why I say.
Oh, honestly, if he wins 10 games this year, and there's an SEC, ACC, high-level G5 opportunity, I wouldn't blame him for leaving.
Right.
As Middle Tennessee, you should applaud him when he gets that opportunity. When your coaches, assistant or head coaches, get a chance to go to a bigger school, a Power 5 school, shake their hand, wish them well. Thank them for their efforts, and go on to the next head coach and do it again and create the culture where championships are expected. So that's what you're seeing at Liberty. I think that's what you've seen at Western Kentucky. And I think McPhee and Massaro have realized Middle Tennessee can do, and they're going to try to do it here.
Austin, it's been great having you on. Plenty more to talk about when that February signing day rolls back around. There's a lot to look forward to as we've discussed today. But before we sign off, Austin, let the listeners know where they can find you.
Yeah, I'm on Twitter, or I guess it's called X now, but Austin Lewis TN. And if you want to hit up Go Middle, it's at Go Middle as well. So Austin Lewis TN is my Twitter handle, and Go Middle is the Go Middle handle.
Excellent. Great work from Austin, as always, as far as all the recruiting information. He does great work over at rivalsgomiddle.com. It is a subscription-based service, but, again, the writing he does over there and those other guys over there at Go Middle, they do great work, so I highly recommend it. Thanks again, Austin. It's been fun.
It's been fun, man. Yeah. Anytime, man.
I appreciate Austin hopping on the holidays to talk a little recruiting with us. Before we sign off, we'll talk the previous week in hoops. We see the men travel to St. Mary's, a much-anticipated matchup as part of the non-conference schedule. But unfortunately, the outcome is nowhere near what was expected, dropping a 71-34 game to the Gales. The Raiders' output of 34 points at this time is the second lowest scoring output in Division I this season. It's also the largest margin of defeat in McDevitt's tenure at MTSU. Not many redeeming quality factors in a game like that. The only thing that comes to mind is the scoring drought the Gales go on late in the first half, where our zone defense causes some issues for the Gales. We hold them to 2 points over the final 8 minutes of that frame. However, when you're only scoring 16 points in the first half, 18 points in the second half, it's not necessarily enough to pull you back into the ball game. However, we do see a turnaround of sorts on Friday as the men go to Southern Utah. They lose a heartbreaker 69-63. It's a game where the Raiders are up for – it's a game where the men lead for about 30 minutes of the game. The last tied point was around the 9-minute mark, where MTSU is tied at 51. The men go on a 4-minute scoring drought and have their lead overtaken. They trail by 5 with about 6 minutes to go. It's a deficit that they can never conquer. Given the shooting woes of this team, they still shoot at 51% clip in that tough road game. The outlying factor is the 16-3 turnover margin. In a system where we struggle enough to score points, giving the other team extra opportunities is less than ideal. You do see some production from Justin at the point guard position, dropping 26 points. That's very promising, especially at his high shooting clip of 11 of 16. And we do well for the first 30 minutes, but we still see this continuing story of being bad late in ball games, where we don't get the shots we're looking for. We also don't defend the perimeter very well in those closing minutes in the final seconds. So all that to say, you definitely see us bounce back from a struggling game at St. Mary's into Southern Utah, but it's tough to see us drop 2 road games, one of which you definitely had the opportunity to win. Moving into conference play, this is only first and second true road games. You have to see us perform better moving into conference play, and they'll have their opportunity in their final non-conference game on the 30th against Murray State. Murray State's had a very tough year. They're definitely not the team that everyone thought they'd be, rolling in at 3-8, and it's going to be your last true shot at a road game prior to conference play. On the women's side, however, we see very little action this time of year, but we had a very dominating win over Northern Kentucky at home, an 83-42 win for the Lady Raiders. It's very promising to see Yulia Grabovskaya with 14 points, 9 rebounds, filling in for Anastasia. Nas has been kind of the anchor down low, and we see Yulia in very limited action, but seeing her come around, get a lot more minutes. She didn't play a ton of minutes, which is what makes her scoring 14 points, 9 rebounds even more impressive. But it's definitely promising to know that we have a second post down low that can give us quality minutes in the event that Nos ever gets into foul trouble. We also see Savannah Wheeler get back to her scoring ways, scoring 34 points. It is her second game in a row in which she scores 20-plus points. There's really just nothing negative you can say about the Lady Raiders. They're scoring the ball at will. They're playing good defense. Granted, Northern Kentucky is by far the bottom of the barrel when it comes to competition this year, but good teams winning by 39 against any opponent, Division I opponent, is not anything to bat an eye at. Their final non-conference game coming up this Saturday, the 30th, at Grand Canyon. That's a Quad 2 contest coming up. I see Grand Canyon as a top 100 team, potentially, given the WAC. The WAC is very top-heavy this year with Grand Canyon, with Stephen F. Austin, a team the Lady Raiders have already beat once this year, and this emergence of Cal Baptist. The WAC is running with a 3-headed monster, and realistically, any of them could be your 13 seed, 14 seed in the NCAA tournament. But that's not to say that these teams aren't any good. But these teams are looking for those quality wins, and home win against MTSU is one that would count tremendously for the Lopes. I expect a battle, it being a road game. Grand Canyon is known for their atmosphere, a very small gym. However, they tend to fill their stands up. Also, it being a holiday, you have to anticipate a lot of people being in town for a game like that. So I'm excited to see what the Lady Raiders are able to do in a very hostile road environment that is Grand Canyon. It's going to be very similar to road environments in Conference USA, and it's a great last little tester before they roll into conference play. And that'll wrap up our week in Blue Raider athletics. I appreciate you stopping by and listening, and of course I appreciate Austin Lewis for stopping by for a few minutes to chat about recruiting. Before I sign off, I'd like to remind everyone they can follow us on Twitter at Blue Raider Pod, or of course write in their questions, submissions into blueraiderpod@gmail.com. Next week I'll be discussing Conference USA basketball hoops with Oliver Baltz at gomiddle.com. In the most recent news, I'm excited to announce the Blue Raider Pod is now available at all of your streaming services, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, TuneIn, Alexa, and many, many more. So, again, I appreciate all the Blue Raider fans that have been listening, giving me great feedback on the podcast, and I hope you'll follow us into the new year. And until next time, go Blue.